All right, good evening, and welcome to the Curriculum Evaluation Committee meeting Tuesday, January 18th, in 2022. It is 6 p.m. in the Nashua High School North Boardroom. We have with us today, we'll take the roll call, Reagan Lamphere. Here. Neil Claffey.
Here.
He is on the phone this evening. Is anyone from the committee opposed to Neil participating by phone?
No.
No? Okay. Also in attendance, we have Ms. Paula Johnson, we have Jennifer Bishop, we have Heather Raymond, we have Sandra Ziem, we have Dr. Kimberly Sarfty and Dr. Garth McKinney, and we have a few guests who are going to be giving us a little presentation here. So, Dr. Sarfty, would you like to introduce our guests this evening?
Yes, so we are very pleased to have Craig Fitzgerald from the Boys and Girls Club here, and we also have Casey Castor from the Youth Council. However, I do think that Dr. McKinney is going to discuss distance education first.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. McKinney.
Okay, included in your packet is two pieces of information. One, a memorandum that went to the Nashua Teachers Union regarding distance ed. Distance education is the new fancy term for remote learning, along with the rules that are in place for distance education. We'll call this the July rule. The July rule is still in effect. You may have heard that the State Board of Ed is working to advance a more restrictive rule around distance ed. That has to go through rulemaking and won't come online for about a month. So the district has a window of time to utilize distance ed, mainly when staffing doesn't permit the schools to open safely for kids. So I met with the NTU leadership today. They have a copy of this proposal. Excuse me one sec. They did share some concerns, and they're going to provide feedback on that in the form of a memorandum of understanding. But basically, there are three schools that are challenged right now with staffing, would be the two high schools and one of our middle schools. Last Thursday and Friday, I spent time at Elm Street. HR has been helping out at one of the high schools. Ms. Kinsella taught in the classroom. Kathy McIntyre was in the guidance office. Mr. Chopra, Mr. Alexander served as lunch monitors, so it's been a all hands on deck approach. Oh, and Dr. Sarfty, yes, was there Friday. Sorry. So the proposal before you would allow us to have students work on their computers and have it count as a day of instruction. It would count for our instructional hours, and it would not prevent us from getting out of school at a certain date. The only tool in the toolbox right now, aside from this, is canceling school and just tacking it on to the end of the school year, which is challenging for parents and families and everybody to schedule their summers and everything else that happens towards the later part of the year. So basically the proposal has thresholds for the high school and middle schools when staff are out, and a day to switch over to an asynchronous day, meaning there wouldn't be live instruction for the whole school day, so it wouldn't be staring at a screen for 7 hours or 6 hours, but independent work supplemented at the teacher's discretion with live instruction. This is kind of like a Band-Aid for something to use in the toolbox to get us through this kind of challenging time. And really the goal remains for us to stay in person as much as possible, and particularly for the younger students. They've made a lot of gains. Some of them haven't been in school for 2 years. And being in Elm Street, they talked about how well the student behavior has improved. While challenging, they seem to be in a good place. So that's a synopsis. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone from the committee have a question?
Well, mine is just a quick, somebody asked me today, so we are not on the 5-day rule then, or are we? They changed, the CDC changed the quarantine time. Is that, somebody asked me and I said I may have told them wrong.
Yes, we are on the 5-day rule. That's
Okay.
relative to COVID. This is relative to distance ed and staffing.
No, I'm sorry for the confusion, but thank you for answering.
Yep.
I have a question, Dr. McKinney. Why was 25 picked as a threshold for the high schools?
That's basically the stretch point for the, based on the principals. Once we get to that level, we're pulling from district office. We have large groups of kids. If you saw the first report I shared with the board, we have a lot of classes in this room, the media center, the auditorium. You could have a student who comes for the school day, and basically 3 out of their 4 blocks, they're sitting in a large space. So that's the threshold the 2 principals came up with, where it just comes really challenging to staff both buildings, and because they're so dependent on each other, because we have kids going back and forth in the CTE program, if one school is out, both would be out.
Is there any alternative for right now, I feel like some of the kids might rather be doing asynchronous learning now instead of waiting until they reach that threshold. Is that possible?
So that would be our next hurdle. The next rule coming from the state board would mandate in-person instruction, and then you could offer remote. So right now, conversations with the union, we haven't done like a hybrid or doing both. You're basically asking teachers to do double duty. And if our staffing can't support in-person, then it certainly can't support in-person and remote at the same time. They're doing a lot. Many of them are double teaching extra blocks for compensation, or just pitching in on the days when we're stretched thin.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first question is regarding CTE classes and how those will be handled, because a lot of them are like hands-on. And then the second question is regarding the expectation for staff who are out sick. So we have people calling in sick because they are genuinely sick, or caring for a loved one who's sick. Are they going to be able to post assignments in Google Classroom? Like, are we going to have the expectation that they have a week's worth of assignments available every week, so that someone could be posting them? I don't know how someone who's sick is going to do that, so.
So this is our second draft back and forth with the NTU. I met with them today for a third draft, so this isn't finalized. Some of those things you're referring to are conversations we're having. That's why asynchronous works. You could have teachers that had assignments ready to go and not be there if they were out sick, and be expected to teach live. We did talk about CTE programming a little bit with the high school principals, so that's something we're going to revisit as well. So in the end, if the committee were to make a motion here, it would be recommending that this go before the full board pending, final discussions with the NTU and an MOU. There are some details that are still a work in progress.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. As I read this today, this is really remote learning. I kind of feel like we're going back to where we were. And then I read success in in-person learning here, and where we came from and where we are right now, and the students and the skills, and what's happened with a lot of the students being home, the behavior problems. And then I listened to some of the questions, and I'm listening, and I read this. We're going to have assignments in the Google Classroom. The teachers could be out for a week. Some kids might not be able to do anything because they don't have access to a computer, and they can make it up. We didn't have the greatest success before without kids on remote. I have a very hard time with this. I cannot support this. I understand we're having staffing issues. I understand the whole thing here. But where are the kids going to go back to? Are we going to be falling backwards again? Kids' assignments, parents on home to make sure the kids do these, are these going to be done? If teachers are sick, How are they going to make sure the kids are in, they don't sign in? I think we're facing the same challenges we did with remote learning. Now we're going to have probably demands from the union. I've just, I think we have to take a look at this. I don't think the State Board of Education is strict enough on this. We had problems during the flu season. I guess the flu is coming back from vacation, so I guess the flu's coming back now. I get it about being sick, because I was down for 6 weeks. Yeah, I was lucky I didn't have to go to work. But this is just, I think we're setting up for failure again, and I don't want to see these kids fail. I don't want to see any more behavior problems. These kids need to be with their peers, not on remote learning and the computers, and it didn't work the first time, and I'm afraid it's not going to work now. Thank you.
Madam President? Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Can I just respond? I guess this came from the concern from the principals of safety issues with large groups of students in the large spaces and being supervised in a minimal way by staff. So I get there are no great solutions. If the only other solution we have to use is canceling school and tacking it on to the end of the school day, that's fine. But just know, if you don't support this program, this proposal, you're putting people back into places where there's a risk and a liability, and when and if the superintendent comes to a meeting and shares that, the board is ultimately responsible. This isn't about you and your time out. This is about safety. This is about kids being out a handful of days so we can get to the end of this month after this wave. So I understand what you're saying. We've done a great job keeping kids in school, but right now we have no safety net. We don't have subs. Paras have been hit by this latest wave. There are a safety net for most days, and now the superintendent's secretary is teaching in a classroom at a middle school. So in the end, that's where we are.
Ms. Seem?
I just wanted to, it came to my mind earlier that several years ago, we did have there was something going on at the time, and they were going to go to subs, volunteer subs from the community who didn't really want to do it all the time. I think Mrs. Hines would have that list, because I'm sure she was in the district at the time. It may not be something that you can use, but there may be some names on, depends on how desperate you get, obviously. But I would like to say that I applaud you for this. I think that this is necessary. I don't think, going to Mrs. Johnson's point, nobody wants to do it, but sometimes circumstances force you, and I think this has been forced on us, because the other alternative, too, is that they can just stay home, and that would be even worse, at least if we're doing some form of remote. And I know all the private schools. My kids are all in private schools, and they're doing remote. So I applaud you for the effort and for it's been a difficult time, and I would not want to have been in your role, so thank you for what you've done.
If I could just add one thing, we have looked into the volunteer piece. Unfortunately, I've been a volunteer, I have 3 kids. Not a lot of volunteers like to enter into secondary and middle high school, and if we have safety issues with administrators who have been hit and struck, I don't think it's a smart idea to put volunteers in that same environment. So that's not something we're willing to support at this time. Thank you.
But thank you for sharing that, because I don't think because we're not in the classroom, we're not always aware of how heartbreaking it can be for anybody to strike one of our beloved teachers, and I say beloved as a genuine term of endearment, it's unacceptable. So thank you again for what you're doing.
Ms. Johnson?
How about some student teachers from Riviera? So going through.
I supervise classrooms on Friday with student teachers. They can't be in the classroom by themselves. Not to mention, if you look at the statistics, the number of students that are going into education programs across the country at all the universities and colleges is gone down the last 3 to 5 years. So
if we implement this, are we going to put a date, like a start date and an end date, like January 31st, and then kind of review it then after? So it's not open-ended type of thing?
Yes, the discretion would be at the board. You could even say to be used up to no more than 3 days, 5 days, whatever. You could put a cap on it. You know, in talking with the union, the MOU would be until the end of the school year because we don't know what's going to happen the rest of the school year. You know, I think it's more than likely that probably by February vacation, the State Board of Ed rules would advance. So this piece wouldn't count for instructional time. So we'd have to revisit it then anyway. So you kind of have a window of time where we can use this. And, you know, I'm hoping that we've seen our staffing get a little better over the last week with the changes in the CDC guidance from the 5 days. But anything can happen. I mean, we have human beings who have families, who have loved ones, who have kids. You know, they can be in and out of quarantine or dealing with health and medical problems all the time. So it gives us I guess, a flexible short-term option until probably February vacation.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I have a couple questions here. First, it says if you're at the high school and you want to switch to distance learning, if either school reaches 25, would both high schools shut down? So if one school has appropriate staffing, both high schools shut down?
Well, that's correct, because we have kids that go back and forth. They're kind of like a unified front for both programming and scheduling.
How many students would you say that affects?
I don't have that number in front of me. I can ask the principals.
Okay. And then my other question would be for the elementary schools, there's not a specific number. Is that because the numbers at different schools work differently?
It's very challenging to get the 12 elementaries to agree in a lot of regards, but take a school like Bicentennial, that's much larger. Their staffing is going to look very different than a smaller school like Broad Street or Amherst Street. So we tried to give some discretion, but pending the approval of the assistant superintendent, those days would be, you know, an asynchronous day. But again, the main goal is to keep those young children in school as much as possible because they've really done a nice job.
And that would be and if those schools were to shut down, it would be by school, not for all of elementary, correct?
Correct.
And actually, the next thing I was going to ask was what you'd referenced a minute ago, was putting a cap on how many days in a row, because my biggest concern here is that we would shift to asynchronous learning at the high school level or middle school level, and then having a difficult time coming back from that. If we were to add that as a cap, what would you recommend, 3 days?
Well, if I could predict the future, I would have made a lot of money a long time ago. You know, I think 3 to 5 days is a appropriate amount. I don't see us being out for long periods of time, and staff is fluid. It can go, you know, it's hard for the principals to judge. They look at it before they go to bed. It could be at one point, and you wake up in the morning, it's at a totally different point. And that's dependent on other districts or other family pieces. You know, you certainly could have a clause in there of 3 days, you know, in advance, and then return to the board for another 3 days or something like that to kind of have like a quota that would be allowed. But again, I think you're only talking 5 weeks, most likely, before the State Board of Ed changes the rules again. The commissioner said a month to 2 months at max.
Does anyone in the committee have a comment? Or, I'm sorry, Mr. Claffey, do you have anything to add or ask?
I had one simple question, and then I was going to ask one other more difficult question. So the days that we are at home, or students are at home doing remote, those would not be counted as snow days?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I guess my other question is, may I make a motion to move this to the whole board?
You certainly may. So you'd like to make that motion. Is there a second for that motion?
For the purposes of discussion, I will second it.
Oh, so actually, it has to be from Ms.
I'm
Lampier.
sorry.
Sorry, it's okay.
I lost my head.
I'll second it.
All right, and so, yes, so, but actually, so go ahead, Ms. Deem, you have a question, and all the members of
I was going to make an amendment going to the 3 or the 5 days, because that sounded like a safeguard of sorts that might be good. But I can't do that because I still remain not a committee member. I'm not a committee member, so I will leave that to one of our other esteemed members.
It's all right. Actually, I was going to make the same amendment. So I would like to amend the motion to, and that's why I was just trying to sit here and think about how to phrase it appropriately.
Madam Chair, may I interject?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Can I just please recommend that the motion just be to move to advance to the full board? I need another meeting with the NTU, and I need the MOU to come before any approval is made. So if you were going to make that motion in terms of a quota, I'd ask that it be made at the full board level, because you're not actually approving the MOU or the actual proposal itself. Am I making sense? Okay.
Right. So right now, was this intended to be only informational until we get a final MOU from the union?
Correct.
Okay. Then I guess, would you care to withdraw your motion, Mr. Claffey?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and would you withdraw your second?
Sure.
Okay. So there will not be a motion on the floor. However, I think it is worth some discussion as we consider this in front of the full board. Obviously, there is an intent, there is interest in making sure that we have a cap. So maybe when you bring that motion to the board, you bring a recommendation of how many days consecutively we'll do that.
Madam,
Yes, sir.
unfortunately, I can't bring a motion to the board. I can bring a recommendation.
I'm sorry. I should have clarified. A recommendation. Sorry.
Again, the motion, if the board is looking for a motion, the recommendation would be move to advance the asynchronous learning proposal to the full board, pending an MOU with the NTU.
Would you like us to make that? I thought you wanted us to hold off and wait until you have the MOU. Would you like us to make that motion?
All right, so I guess there's two ways to do this. It can come out of committee, or if there's consensus here, meeting with the board president, this could be placed on the next agenda with the board.
All right. Well, why don't we formalize it and make it a vote? All right. So, Mr. Claffey, would you like to make a motion to advance this to the full board pending an agreement, an MOU with the NTU president?
Absolutely, and that was my intent.
Thank you. All right. And
I'll second it.
all right, with a second from Ms. Regan, or I'm sorry, Ms. Lampier. And so also, would Ms. Ziem, would you care to contribute?
Yeah, I won't make a motion, though. I would just like to again thank Dr. McKinney for one of my biggest concerns has been that the teachers would feel included, that they wouldn't feel that we were just arbitrarily changing things without their input. And it becomes very obvious that Dr. McKinney has gone out of his way to try to include them in the discussion. And so I would just like to thank him for that and commend him for that. So thank you.
Excellent. Would the committee be amenable to instructing the superintendent to, when they bring this motion back in front of the board, to put a 5-day cap on any consecutive days of remote learning?
No.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How far in advance do we know that teachers are going to be absent? It's that morning, right? So we really can't plan for how many consecutive days we're going to be out. So it's a hope and a prayer that we're not out for consecutive days, but there's, I was going to say something else, and then I was like, that's not right to say.
So based on the CBAs, they can, obviously call out sick the morning of. So it's hard to forecast, and it depends on what the nature of their leave is. If they're part of the COVID piece or not, and anticipating when they can come or return to work. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that there's really no way of seeing how many teachers are going to be out on a certain day until we get to that day.
But I think
So-
what I'm hearing from the committee is an intent to have a bank of days that could be used when staffing falls apart, with the intent of returning to in-person as quickly as possible and not being out for an extended period of time, which I believe has been our intent all along, is to keep kids in school.
Right.
I mean, when I go around, I've taught middle school for 6 years, 10 to 1, kids say they want to be in school.
Yep.
It's very rare they say they want to be out. But to the safety piece, the principals are particularly concerned when they're in the building. Some of them have only had like one assistant principal at the high school level. Just the safety concerns, they're worried something's going to happen and it's going to make for more difficult decisions down the road.
Yeah, and if we put a cap on it, then we would have to wait to come back to a meeting or readdress it. So I feel like a cap may be a short-sighted way of addressing the bigger issue. I have another question, though. Our next meeting is the 31st. What's the plan from now until then?
So as I spoke with each of you, if staffing continues to progress to a point where, we need to use these days, we would have this committee's approval, finance and policy, the ability to distribute devices to those 3 schools, and the ability to go asynchronous at those 3 schools, probably by next week.
Okay.
Or by that board meeting.
Okay.
And then you could put a cap on the days, but again, that's contingent on the next couple of meetings, and today was a good staffing day, but, I was concerned the end of last week, we were definitely getting to a place where we were the week before.
Yeah.
So,
No, I like this plan.
and the board should also know that we're definitely relying on alumni students as substitutes right now, and
Oh,
they go
dear.
back to school next week. So while I don't want them to go, I'm happy to, they've been very helpful right now. So when that safety net goes, we could be back in classrooms doing lunch duty again.
Yeah, I was reluctant to ask for a cap because this is so obviously an emergency situation. And in an emergency situation, a lot of times there's no way of telling what's going to happen next.
I'm going to be honest, I'm a little gun shy about moving this forward without either a date deadline, an end date, or without a maximum number of days consecutively. I understand what you're saying, Ms. Lampier, about this would be theoretically an emergency use situation, and I understand completely the necessity of last week having to shut down the school for safety reasons when you don't have enough staff. But I'm very concerned that we will end up in a situation as we were in 2020, the previous school year, where we will go to remote school and we will not come out until May. And I do not think that that serves our students. And I know that is not the intent of the district. I know that you know that in-school, in-person learning is best for kids. I would completely recognize that. But I have to admit, I'm very anxious about not having any kind of parameters for this. Yes, Naseem?
Well, I'm just thinking about, you were talking about the high school, and it has to be both high schools because of the mixed classes that we have. And I'm wondering if is there going to be a cost? If the remote days don't count as snow days, then it will add to the number of days. Am I going in the wrong direction? Will it add to the number of days that our teachers have to teach? For instance, if they're teaching remote and it doesn't count, that day will have to be made up, right? So will that not end up in additional days, or am I misunderstanding something?
Well, I know it's confusing. So if we stay with the July rule right now, a school day is a school day, whether the kids come through the door or they wake up in their pajamas or work on a Chromebook, it's a school day from now until February break.
Okay.
Okay,
So it's after February that we have to,
more or less, yes.
we don't know what's going to happen. Okay.
Yep.
So I have 2 things. And one of them is that I'm wondering what the quality of education kids are getting right now when we have such a high number of staff out and they're just hanging out, basically cooling their heels in an auditorium for several periods when they're not, they don't have anything to do. One, and two, I'm really concerned about the safety of other students and our staff in those circumstances. I mean, kids are impulsive and teenagers do stupid things. That's just part of their developmental stage. And I'm not saying all teenagers, but when you have 300 of them in one room, it just takes one to get bored and make a poor decision. And I'm just really worried about the safety of our one or two staff and the 299 other kids who aren't learning because they're sitting in the auditorium not having an assignment. So I don't want remote learning. I think we all agree that in-person instruction is best. We've learned that very well over the last couple years. But if kids are sitting in an auditorium, that's not in-person instruction. That's, not even a study hall because they don't have anything to do. So I do hope that this committee sends this to the full board with the changes that the final MOU has with the teachers union.
If you move your phone back, I think that'll stop the noise. Oh, maybe it's that one. Oh. All right. All right, I guess we should go, if everybody is done, we're gonna call the roll. Since Mr. Claffey's on the phone, Mr. Claffey, do you have an opinion on whether this should have an end date?
I would oppose that.
I'm sorry, sir?
I oppose that.
You oppose that?
Too many unknowns, yes.
All right. Unfortunately, so we'll go ahead and call the roll. I'm going to explain. I'm going to vote no on this, not because I don't agree that it's a necessity, but I cannot in good conscience not have an unlimited amount of time for remote learning. I'm sorry. But go ahead. All right. Mr. Coffey, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Lampier?
Yes.
And I will vote no. All right, motion passes. This will be moved forward to the full board pending an agreement with the union. All right, so the next item on the agenda is Learning 2025, an update from Dr. McKinney.
Yes, included in your packet is a memo stating that in August, Nashua was accepted to the Learning 2025 network. We're the only district in New Hampshire. Included with that, as being part of the network, we get access to a senior consultant, progress monitoring, a district dashboard, and professional learning. I just think everything that's going on right now in public ed, it's nice to have a support network out there. So progress monitoring and the district dashboard will allow us to see how well we're doing towards student achievement and getting kids back in classrooms and the advancement of their learning and recovery from the pandemic. PD, or professional learning, there's a webinar that's available every month. You can either view it in person or it's recorded and you can access it later. I watched one of them, which was on early learning. I shared a lot of good information with our Title I preschool and our preschool coordinator. And then lastly, just the networking that's going on in terms of being able to be with a couple of hundred districts around the country and hearing some of the solutions that are out there has been pretty invaluable. We're not the only one facing these challenges, and if somebody has a solution out there that works, we're certainly interested in hearing about it. I don't think, my experience so far, it takes anything away from the strategic plan. In fact, I think it benefits having additional eyes and ears out there that can coordinate and streamline some of the goals and initiatives that are in place. If anything, I think it supports it. We have a lot of data in this district, and if we can get to a place where we can see it in real time, I think it's a tremendous asset. So I recommend the committee approve the participation in the network. The annual cost is about $14,000. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. Back in August, I believe, when I attended the meeting, this came forward. I had asked if we could get any information from any other districts back, and I'm learning now that it's nothing in New England right now. It's more around the country, right? Do we have any? And I had asked, I wanted to see the reviews from other districts on whether or not they thought joining Learning 2025 was really a good investment. And I've never received anything. And have we joined this already? Or are we in the process?
It was, I applied, we were approved, it's been placed in a grant, and it's pending board approval.
Pending board approval, okay. I still would like to see how other districts around the country has fared with this and how it has worked in their particular situation. I understand the challenges that we have in this district. We have a lot of challenges, and we're not any different than a lot of other school districts after kids being out of school for about a year, year and a half. Big challenges coming back, learning socialization. Kids need socialization more than adults do at times, because that's how they learn, that's how they interact. And I just wanted to see, because of the investment, I don't care if it's with the Nashua grant or it's with the district money, it's still taxpayers' money that came from somewhere. And I had asked for that, I did not get it. So, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions right now? Ms. Seem?
Wouldn't they have a website where they would have that kind of stuff? A lot of times they do. So I would think we could just go to the website, no? Does that make sense?
There is a website.
Yeah, and I bet you on there, at least most of the websites today have a section right in there where they have comments from people who have been, that's what I do with all my doctors. So I only have 100 though.
So this is from the,
I'm sorry.
oh, I was just going to ask if this is, it's offered by the School Superintendents Association. So is this an opportunity for all the teachers or just the superintendents or just administration?
Acceptance into the network allows anybody access to the professional learning. So the senior leadership team, principals, anybody in the district can have access to what goes on there.
How many of those people have expressed an interest in taking advantage of this?
So when the idea came up to apply, the district leadership team was in support of applying. I haven't shared anything beyond what's in this memo with the district because it's pending board approval. Have I shared it to faculties and told them we are accepted? Yes. One of the senior consultants presented at the state superintendent's conference. And it's just an opportunity to live and learn and have some support. It's likely or possibly you're going to have a new superintendent in the district. You have new leaders, and during a difficult time, I just think now's the time where we can get access to cutting-edge research and support across the country.
Will it be this much money every year, and will there be a grant to cover it every year?
Yes to both.
Thanks.
So my concern with this is that it goes through 2025. It is a considerable amount of money, but also, as you referenced, we're in this process of searching for a new permanent superintendent right now. And so I'm concerned that of taking a philosophy switch move while we still have this kind of thing going on. I recognize this is part of the American Superintendents Association, but I'm a little concerned with throwing more things at our administrators, at our teachers, at our, then trickling down to our students for another form of, it looks like there's going to be some kind of tracking in here to see how it progresses all at once when we've already got a lot of upheaval in our district with transitions between, well, now possible transition back to remote learning, also possible transition with a new superintendent, transitions with a lot of things. We've still got our MTTSB, which I think is a great program, and I think I would like to see more things. We're trying to work more closely with the folks here in the community locally. I'm a little concerned with taking on something from a national network when we have so many things here locally that are currently kind of up in the air, and I'm concerned with throwing one more thing at our administration. It seems like we might be starting to spread ourselves a little thin, and it's kind of a long-term cost for a long-term commitment all the way through 2025 that kind of concerns me when our financial situation is a little bit in flux right now. So I don't think that I will be supporting this particular item. Mr. Claffey, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I just want to ask Dr. McKinney, are your head teachers and liaison members, the ed team, are they on board with this? Have they been a stakeholder in this? That's it.
I haven't spoken to the broader curriculum and head teacher team until it's approved by the board. Right now, this piece is only at a district level, and in conversations with the senior consultant, nothing else would be a burden or additional stress for anybody else in the district. The only door that's opened has been to the professional learning. So we're not asking staff to do anything different with assessments. We're not asking them to do anything different with any initiatives. The only piece that's opened is opportunity to the webinars that are recorded and for free PD.
I'm curious about the Sr2 grant. Now, this money has been given to schools across the country to improve, teaching. And so this seems to me like a good use of the money. Is there any other alternative way that you could have spent this money that you had in mind, or that would have a different impact on the schools? Or is it just that if we don't use it, that's it, it's gone?
Well, during this time, there's not an absence of ideas for spending money. There's always other ones. But the things that are in here are particularly important. Early learning, social emotional learning, and educator pipeline. We need to find ways to get more teachers in the classroom. So, I understand the cost, but in terms of the return investment, it is much larger. If you're going to have a new superintendent sitting in that office, they get 14 hours of consultation time with the senior consultant who's been a superintendent for over 20 plus years. I think that's certainly valuable given the number of things that are going on in the district.
Yes, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I'm on the website now, best I could get on, and you have to sign in, code of conduct, my profile, notifications. I don't see anything on reviews here, probably because I can't sign in. So I guess my original question stands. It was nice of Ms. Ziem to figure out maybe the website, but I know I have a slow connection here, but I can't find anything that anybody other districts saying that this program really worked. We love the program. We have some concerns about the program. So that's why my question was, because you can't always find things on the website. Things you don't want to find pop up. But sometimes you have to sign in to be able to see anything. Some information isn't free out there. Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to move to turn down the Learning 2025 plan at this time. Mr. Claffey, are you still there?
Yes, and I will vote. Okay, so is your motion saying that you're voting no? Is that correct?
The motion is to not advance this to the full board. So yes.
I agree with you.
All right. So I'm going to have you second the motion. Is that okay?
Sure, I second.
All right, seconded by Mr. Claffey. And we'll go ahead and vote. Ms. Lampier, how do you vote?
No.
Mr. Claffey, how do you vote?
Just want to make sure, if I'm voting no, we're not moving this forward.
No, no, I've made the motion kind of backwards. You want to vote yes if you do not want to move it forward.
I vote yes.
All right.
I don't want to move it forward for now.
And I also vote yes, and so the motion is not moved forward to the full board. Thank you. All right. So next on the agenda, I turned upside down. The next item on the agenda is the curriculum management plan.
So before the committee is the latest draft of the curriculum management plan. I believe we heard from teachers at a meeting before the end of December, or during the month of December. It was around teacher representation and participation. So included in there is a line expanding teacher participation in the process of reviewing curriculum, updating curriculum, monitoring the effectiveness of curriculum. So I believe it's on, page 3, that teacher representatives from steering committee, schools, grade levels, and/or departments would be included in the council that would review curriculum and make recommendations for changes in updating curriculum.
All right. Correct me if I'm wrong, the only major change from the previous version was to actually include the teachers at a more integral level, right?
Yes, that part in red on page 3, correct.
Okay. I think this is well laid out. It's designed. I like the fact that I like the little chart in here that you're constantly assessing. I do support this, and I appreciate the fact that you took feedback from the district and from the Board of Education to include the teachers a little more. Are there any members of the committee with any questions? All right. I'm looking for a motion to move to the full board the curriculum management plan from 2021 to 2023 as presented.
I can make the motion.
And I will second it. All right, Mr. Claffey, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Lampier?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, next we have Project Succeed. That's you guys, right? All right, we're welcome to our esteemed guest this evening. Thank you for your patience. And thank you, Dr. McKinney. Stay warm.
So I'm really excited about this. we've all sat here and we've listened to teachers talk about the many challenges that they've been facing, particularly at the middle school and the high school levels. Unfortunately, teachers have seen behaviors that they haven't seen in the past. Certainly, some of the challenges that they've been experiencing and that they've been observing have been a result of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. We know that we have significant mental health issues to address here in this district, and we have been working really diligently to do that. And again, we've been working really diligently to try to address behavioral issues. However, one thing that we recognize, and that's something that has been very apparent by the feedback that we've received meeting after meeting, is that what we've been doing is not working. Historically, when we have a student who has a major behavioral infraction, that student would be suspended out of school for 10 days, and that is kind of standard procedure here. And, unfortunately, a lot of times when a student is out of school for 10 days, we have no idea what's going on. I don't not necessarily believe that helps to change the behavior, and we're seeing that the behavior is not changing. The students who are taking up a significant amount of time because of their behavior are the same students in the middle schools and the same students in the high schools. That doesn't mean that, we're going to give up on them. In fact, we want to do the exact opposite. What we did was we sat down with our amazing community partners who, I have to say, put down all of their logos, and they sat down and they rolled up their sleeves with us, with all of the administrators from the middle schools and the high schools, and they said, okay, we see these challenges that you all are having. We really want to face them head on. We want to work together, and we want to come up with some really creative solutions. And so one of the things that we talked about was this idea of Project Succeed. And essentially what we would love to be able to do is we would love to be able to sit down with a student who, again, committed like a major infraction and say, we would like to issue a conditional consequence. We understand that when we suspend somebody for 10 days from school, that can have significant consequences in the future. Colleges are not excited about seeing, a whole bunch of days of out-of-school suspension on a child's transcript. And we also want to make sure that we don't limit children from having future opportunities because they made mistakes while they're young. And so what we'd like to do is be able to say, okay, you committed this infraction, and we are going to administer a conditional consequence. In order for your record to be expunged, we need you to commit to this program. And the program is pretty strict. We have some pretty strict parameters in place. Rather than being home unsupervised or, parents have to work, they can't necessarily keep an eye on their kids for 10 days, we would send our students in, certainly Craig can talk a little bit more about transportation and other logistical things, but we would send our students through transportation from the Boys and Girls Club to that facility. We would have academics tutors on site. We would have a special educator on site, and we would also have access to counseling services thanks to the Youth Council. Right now, we do have a small space, or for a while, Youth Council has been generous enough to help us out with some out-of-school suspension alternatives and give us a space, but being at the Boys and Girls Club would provide access to larger spaces, more technology. Again, it would free up some opportunities for more counselors. One of the things that we really want to be able to do is we want to be able to educate students who commit these infractions. Like, for instance, if we have a student who is caught vaping, rather than just suspending students, we want them to participate in group activities so that they understand the dangers of vaping. If we're dealing with students who are bullying or fighting, we want them to understand, not just through lecturing with them, but really engaging in deep conversation and being able to have access to a counselor, kind of what the consequences to their behavior, the consequences look like. So again, what we decided to do was partner with our wonderful community partners who can talk a little bit more about a little bit more about the details. And I also want to say, although he's not here tonight, Joe Manzoli from the YMCA has played an integral part in this partnership, as he always does. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Hi, thanks for having us. I'm Casey Castor. I'm the Executive Director at the Youth Council. And as Dr. Sarfty mentioned, currently we do have a small suspension center that we're under contract with the district for. It serves up to 7 middle school students a day at our offsite at our office. And one of the key pieces of that program over time, which we've offered it for a number of years, even before I started with the agency, is the access and mental health focus of the program. So all of the youth that come through have the opportunity to have a needs assessment, which covers mental health, factors as well as substance use. Often we know that youth are sometimes self-medicating, responding to pressures with substance use, and so we have a counselor at our office that meets with them and spends about an hour or so talking with them, and then generates what we call a needs assessment that's sent out to district administrators. So it would go to their principal, it would go to their guidance counselor, their parents, and the youth also sees it. And it contains some recommendations for the youth in terms of, referrals if there's a need for more intensive mental health services, some contact information for families. It goes beyond just sort of identifying issues, but really kind of working to help both the school and the parents understand the needs and the situation. And so that is the piece that, as we looked at, the very small size that the program currently is, only being able to host 7 students, and the day is generally just in a classroom space, so it doesn't offer the enrichment activities and spaces that the Boys and Girls Club can offer. We really wanted to make sure that we brought over that social emotional piece and that we improved it and increased it. As Dr. Sarfty said, the plan would be that we would have a full-time staff member there providing those needs assessments for all the students. If we're talking, up to 40 students, that's going to be quite a lot. Some of them will be there for 1 day, some of them might be there for 10 days. So it'll really kind of depend on their length of stay. But they'll have access to that, and that the parents will have the opportunity to approve whether or not they get that needs assessment. But that information is always shared with the families and the school. But in addition to that, really developing, we've already got counselors that work in all the all of the high schools, both high schools. And right now at the middle school level, we have 1 counselor who's split between Fairgrounds and Elm Street. And their role is really to provide sort of a short-term intervention. So some of the students they'll see for maybe the whole school year if the child is really working to get into a long-term therapy program. But for the most part, it's 3 weeks, 6 weeks, up to half a school year, along with support groups. So working with kids on these specific things: substance use, aggression, coping skills, and stress management. We've done those kind of groups in the schools. So the goal with this is to add in that full-time person at the suspension center, but then also be able to add 2 people, 1 at each middle school, 2 more people at the middle school level, so that we'd have 1 person at each middle school that those kids can then go back to. They would be referred out right after their suspension to meet with a counselor from our staff at the schools, just to provide that sort of help and adjustment as they come back. Because really, as Dr. Sarfty is mentioning, most of these behaviors are tied to some unmet needs that the kids are having, and a lot of times they're completely unidentified. We've had situations where we've had students who are being extremely disruptive in class, even being violent in class, and after meeting with our counselor and talking about their needs, they shared that it's as simple as they don't want to get called on because they feel like the kids will know that they don't know or understand, and that was referred to the special ed department, and that child was, in the case I'm thinking of, was evaluated and received an IEP. And so that's an academic support that came out of really identifying sort of these behavioral causes. So that's the piece that the Youth Council will continue to provide as the program shifts over to the Boys and Girls Club for a larger and more interactive space.
Hi, I'm Craig Fitzgerald. I'm the Executive Director over at the Boys and Girls Club. So for some of you who haven't been to the Boys and Girls Club, it's a 50,000 square foot facility. We have three basically age groups. We have a child care facility for 5 to 8 year olds. We have a 9 to 12 year old. We call it the clubhouse. And then we also have a state-of-the-art teen center. And we serve anywhere at peak pre-COVID, 478, I do like that song, by the way, 478 children a day. Right now, we're in the mid-200s. Numbers are down, obviously, for safety reasons due to COVID. We have two academic centers, one dedicated to teens, one dedicated to 9 to 12-year-olds. We also have a cultural arts facility. We have a pool that most of the high school swim teams and dive teams participate at, and we also have a full-size gymnasium. So just to give you an idea of the facility, logistically, how this would work is any child who is put into in-school, out-of-school suspension would actually, rather than being in-school or out-of-school, would actually be bused, and we would provide all the transportation to the Boys and Girls Club. The kids that are in junior high would go to the one education room, which can house up to 20, 25 kids, plus we have additional breakout rooms as well as a large games room to house more. The high school kids would go to the second education room. As Casey said, they'll have dedicated tutors to help them along the way. Now, what I will say is that, during remote learning, we actually did house up to 150 kids any given day. We provided 100 free Chromebooks, 2 kids that didn't have internet access to their house. Many of the kids from the club that were doing poorly in school actually improved their grades because of that focused mentoring. And so the idea here is that these kids will have dedicated mentors in their respective areas to help them do their schooling while they're in suspension. We'll kind of narrow down the schooling to 8:30 to 12:30, and then every one of those kids will have lunch with one of our youth development professionals at the Boys and Girls Club. And let me backtrack. What we're going to do is actually pull those kids out while they're getting schooling, and that's when they'll do the need assessment. So again, imagine, if you will, 20 kids, tutors walking around the room helping them with their classes while they're in school or out-of-school suspension, and then one at a time we'll pull them out and do that social emotional needs assessment. If we determine, or Casey's team determines, that they do need follow-on care, they will be referred to the on-site clinicians that are in the schools. In addition, the Boys and Girls Club, we spend about $150,000 in prevention, everything from drugs to vaping, et cetera. We have an on-site director of prevention. Based on the type of infraction they had, we can also refer them to after-school support that'll help both them and their families. And so the idea is keep school learning constant, don't send them home, give them dedicated support, because many of them, there's a correlation between kids that have behavioral disturbances and usually kids that are kind of suffering in terms of their grades. So the idea is to help them with their grades, but then also get them the follow-on support they need. And the feeling is that while there's a slight investment on the front end, we as a community are going to pay for them now, or we're going to pay for them 15, 20 years from now. And so the idea is to try to give them the help that they need. For lunchtime, we're actually going to have them have lunch with youth development professionals. So one of the things that the club really prides itself on is our role modeling approach. And so kids gravitate toward people that they have a liking for, that they can relate to. Kids to role models or youth development professionals that they know are not like an authoritative figure, but someone who's been in their shoes before and kind of relate to the situation they're in. And so by having lunch with those kids, they'll be able to connect with them on a human level. During that time, they'll be able to find out what those kids like, whether it be cultural arts, whether it be music, whether it be athletics, whatever. And then when we think about follow-on care for these kids, we're going to encapsulate the curriculum into fun activities that we know the kids like. Now, this might be counterintuitive because normally you would take a punitive approach toward a kid who's acting out, but instead what we're going to do is we're going to have a core curriculum for helping these kids, both academically and from a social emotional perspective, but for the follow-on care, we're going to disguise it in something that they like. It's like a company that uses a value proposition for you to go after their credit cards. It's like, hey, did you have fun today? Why don't you come back and do a cultural arts activity next week? And then while they're doing the cultural activity, that same mentor is going to engage with them. And then once they establish that trust, they'll be able to divert them toward the care that they need, whether it be prevention-related or otherwise. And so the idea is when you think about we think about academics in terms of like, there's the formal and the informal. I don't want to get on a tangent here, but the formal was kind of like, what are your grades, academics, that stuff. But then there's the informal, which is the human part aspect. And if we focus on one without focusing on the other, then it topples. And with these kids, it's already leaning. And so the idea behind this program is to come up with a way to, rather than take a punitive approach, but to take a caring kind of mentorship approach toward helping these kids. And the idea is that we're going to establish very clear measures of success. And I promise you we're not going to get it right the first time. But the idea is we're going to do very, very clear measures of success, and on a biweekly, monthly basis, we're going to measure ourselves against that and rapidly iterate. And so we're going to continually adjust through the spring, adjust through the fall. And so a year from now, the program we have may be somewhat or much different than what we started with, but it'll have been adapted based on the feedback we're getting from the kids and the measurement results we're attaining along the way. And then our job would be to report to the vice superintendents and the superintendents and the teachers on that progression. And then the long-term thing would be, rather than, having like kids come to the club and talk to the youth professionals there, and then going to the school and talking to guidance counselors there, it would be a conglomeration of people at the youth council, the club, the Y, having a youth discussion, so no matter where that child goes, they're getting the same feedback, and we're collective as a community moving those kids forward. That's the premise. So, and then at the end of the day, what we'll do is they can choose to go. They can choose to go home. We'll drive them. We drive every child, all 200 kids that want to ride home, we drive them to their doorstep every night. We'll do the same for these kids. Or if they choose to stay, they'll get free membership to the Boys and Girls Club, and they can stay for whether it be one of the cultural arts activities, any one of the activities that we have. And then Casey's team, our team, Joe from the Y, and Kimberly and her team will continually kind of work over time to evolve it into something that we think will be really great. I'll pause there. I know it's a lot.
I just want to add, one of the things we really do want to encourage is sort of that after-school care, because we want students to have a safety net. We want them to have that structure that they might not be able to get at home, because again, I'm a working parent. I'm not able to be by my children's side every minute after school. And so we want them to have a safe place to fall. We want them to be able to have these strong relationships with their mentors. And I really love what Craig is saying about this is truly a community effort. One of the things about this that's so exciting is that, again, everybody's kind of putting their labels down, and it's just like nobody's competing in terms of, who's going to be working with our students. It's like everybody just came to the table and really thought about this plan that I think addresses a lot of the needs that we heard from our teachers, and then certainly what our students are demonstrating every day in school.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. At one time, the Girls Inc. had a program that if students got suspended from school, they went over there for a day or so.
That's right.
Is that still there?
So that was the original Youth Council suspension center, and then through time, I think through actually budget cuts, because the Boys and Girls Club actually provided the transportation for that, it went to the Girls Inc. facility, and then over time, the funding got smaller.
Okay, let me ask a question. I remember when I was on the board the first time, we had a program in the Boys and Girls Club. I can't remember her name who ran it. What?
The Phoenix Academy?
I don't know what it was. I know it was downstairs. Yeah. And kids would be in there, and we had a couple problems. Some kids, I hate to say escaped, but they left school when they shouldn't have, and we had some problems. I can't remember her name who ran the program, but I knew her well, and I knew her mother. I still know her mother very well.
Patty?
Patty Place. Patty. Thank you, Ms. Ziem. We know the same people. It's like small world. Whatever happened to that program?
So that was before my time. I did speak to some folks who worked at the Boys and Girls Club back then, and they said similar to what Casey said. It was two things. One, funding started to dwindle, and then two, around 2000, I believe it was around 14 years ago, I think it was that far back, we did a full renovation of the Boys and Girls Club to add a state-of-the-art teen center, education center for teens, et cetera. While that renovation was going on, which was about a year, those kids went somewhere else, and it just never returned.
Was it on the same idea of this? that we're doing right now?
My understanding is, it was like alternative learning, correct?
It was alternative learning. Here's my problem. Is every parent going to have to sign off parental consent for their child to go into any of these programs? And we will sit down with every parent. They will have to sign a consent form now, later, and in the future, or are we just going to start moving kids over without the parents' consent and all this testing?
So let me take that, yeah. So, no, we wouldn't do anything without parents' the parental consent, definitely. Every time there's a major infraction, parents are asked to come into the building and/or meet via Zoom, depending on what the conditions are. And there generally is a plan sort of outlined for each child, whether or not they're being suspended in school, out of school. So during those meetings is when this would be communicated to parents, certainly. I do think that a lot of parents would be happy to know that their children have a place to go if, in fact, they are being suspended out of school. The one thing I would say also about in-school suspension, if it's short, there are times when a student is maybe suspended for a couple hours. Maybe they do something around lunchtime, and then they have to go, and they're in school suspension for a couple of hours. Certainly, an arrangement like this wouldn't pertain to those students, so, and those wouldn't be major infractions. But I do know that this is a lot more meaningful and allows students to not fall further behind in their academic work versus a traditional sort of in-school suspension room, which is usually one person, right? I mean, just like probably when we were in school, right? It's one person, and then you have a bunch of kids who may or may not be doing work. And then again, out of school, there really isn't any supervision unless parents are able to provide that. So none of this would be done without parental consent. And I definitely posit that there'll be parents who are happy about this because it's a lot more thoughtful, I think, than what we've traditionally been doing.
And do we know how many students are having behavioral problems because they fell through the crack? They might be 3 or 4 years behind in reading, math, and the academics, that we know that if kids fall behind, like you were saying, they might be afraid to ask a question because their peers might laugh at them because they're afraid. But from what I've seen as a parent, is that if your child falls behind 4 years significantly, you will have behavioral problems because it's almost like they're screaming out like, help me, I need to get caught up, I'm drowning in the sea of education. And so that's a very important piece to me, that we know these kids for the behavior, there's other reasons that they have behavioral problems. They could have issues at home and they act out in school because they don't know how to address it. But the kids that fell behind, how are we addressing that? So if there is a behavioral problem, we work with them to get them up in their academics to grade level, or close to grade level.
So we will also have a special educator on site who will work certainly with the academic tutors, also work to communicate with the classroom teachers when they do transition back to school, when it comes to providing intervention for those students. The special education teacher who will be spending time at the Boys and Girls Club with these students is very well versed in MTSS, a multi-tiered system of support, to be able to, again, target their core instruction, but also to be able to provide really intentional, targeted intervention for those students so that we can help to make up learning loss. Because sometimes if you don't have this small setting and you don't have the opportunity to really get to know children, in this kind of intimate way, you might not recognize that maybe the reason behind their behavior is because of the fact that they are so far behind in academics, kind of like what Casey was just talking about. And so this sort of small, intimate environment provides more of those opportunities for us to really get to know kids and to figure out what's going on.
So if they're behind in learning, do we come up with a plan on how to get them to be, so if they're in, let's say, 8th grade, and they're 3 years behind in reading, let's say, or 3 years behind in math, What kind of a plan do we put in place to get them so when they go on to the next grade, they don't become 4 years behind or 5 years behind, because then you're still going to have the same behaviors, the same problems, and the goal is to get these kids to be mainstreamed, where even if it's for a week, to mainstream them back into the classroom, and they're able to sit and to be able to function properly without the behavior plans. I hear a lot what we can do, but I don't hear a lot on how do we take a kid that's so far behind that we get them to where they need to be. That behavioral problem's going to be there until that kid reaches that level that he feels secure versus insecure in his learning. And that's where the piece I miss every time when I'm in these meetings. 20 years ago, 22 years ago, the same piece I talked about that still exists in education, and I don't get why we, with all the studies and all the data we have, it hasn't helped these poor kids that fall behind. Back when my kids were in school, it was reading, it was whole language, thank you. It was whole language. And then we had a generation of kids that didn't know phonics, couldn't read because of whole language, and they fell behind. Some kids it affected worse than others. But we come up with all these great new inventions in education, and sometimes the old ways were better in math and reading than the new ways. And I feel bad for these kids. My heart breaks for these kids. That's why I'm back on this board, and this is why I ask the same questions over and over again. What plan do we have in place for these students that if they're so far behind, you can put them into the Boys and Girls Club, we can give them all the help that they need and have them with psychologists and all that. But once you put them back in the classroom, if they don't feel secure and they're not seeing the results, we have the same problems.
So I think we're definitely talking about, we're talking about two different things. The first thing is this Project Succeed ensures that students are not falling further behind when it comes to their academics. Rather than, sticking them in a room where they may or may not do work, that's not happening. Now we have adults who are by their side working with them so that they can catch up and stay on track. But I hear what you're saying, Ms. Johnson. And one thing I definitely want to say is our teachers are not just sitting behind their desks twiddling their thumbs. No, I understand that, but what I just want to make sure that I say is that our teachers every single day are trying to figure out what they can do for every single student in their class. This is not something that any teacher has figured out how to do perfectly. I mean, if that was the case, then there would be a school district somewhere in this country where all of the kids are proficient. There are so many different variables, and teachers are working every single day, working with reading specialists, working with coaches to try to figure out what every single student needs. Do we get it right every single time? Absolutely not. And again, like I said, there are many different variables, but we have special educators who work with our classroom teachers. We have ELL teachers who are working with our classroom teachers to make sure that we're providing every single possible support that a student needs. What we need to do is, well, first of all, again, the COVID-19 pandemic didn't help the fact that we have had disrupted learning for the last 2 years. But what we really need to do is try to just clear everything out of the way and give teachers the room to be able to teach. We don't want teachers to be dealing with all kinds of behaviors in their classrooms. That's what we're trying to do as administrators, excuse me, and that's what we're trying to do with our community partners, is clear sort of all of the disruption and all the noise out of the way so that teachers can do what they do best, which is teach our kids.
And I'm not saying that the teachers aren't doing anything, and I've seen some of the videos that's been sent to me about kids' behaviors, in the hallway. I mean, and I feel bad for the teachers when they've got to become a resource officer, which we should be having here. But my question, it wasn't that the teachers aren't doing anything. There's just so much that they can do when a child falls behind. They need extra remedial help. And that's what my question basically is here. They go on to the Boys and Girls Club. We find out what's wrong. They cool down for maybe 10 days, 5 days, 2 days, or whatever. We bring them back, but if the issue is still there, I don't want them, see them back to where they are again, because what we have to do is solve the problem and then move on. I'm not saying that teachers aren't doing anything, so I really don't want that to be said or misconstrued here. There's just so much they can do. If they have a class of 25 kids and you got 2 or 3 kids that really need the extra help, we have to find out how do we get them that extra help.
Definitely.
So let's make it clear. Thank you.
I think that's a good point, and I think that that's one of the good things that can come from this program is that you're working with the special educators and you're having these evaluations while you're there at the center. I think that's excellent, and I think that's one of the good things that can come out of this is we can assess the students and then follow up with the any counseling services or find out if they needed a 504 or an IEP that maybe we didn't recognize before. So that's good, and I'm looking forward to having more of our students be able to take advantage of this program, and I really appreciate how many different supports we have through our community partners that we're working with right now. Naseem, did you have something to add?
Yes, but first off, I want to, especially for the sake of our new board members, the Phoenix program was the program that Patty ran. As I remember, that was eliminated as a budget cut. Please be aware that we may be looking at those budget cuts again. Unfortunately, the problem that she is speaking to ultimately becomes resources. We are getting resources here at a very I want to say obviously it's going to be less expensive than if we had to go the whole gamut. And for that, we need to thank our community support. We need to thank Casey. Now, memories of you have come back to me. I'm old and I forget, but I appreciate you've been around, I think, for a few years. We'll leave it at that. I've been too many years. And Craig, we are so happy to have you join the team and look forward to working. I encourage all the new board members to go over to the Boys Club and see the wonderful facility that they've developed over there. It's amazing what they have. And it's not perfect because the needs change, and as the needs change, it evolves. Everything is a moving target. And so, but my question is, sorry for all that hot air. My question is, we're starting out with 40 spaces, if I understand, there are about 40 spaces at the Boys Club and 7 spaces, which would be like, are we saying that we have a cap, if you will, or somewhat of a cap of 47-ish?
No,
are we
no.
using both facilities or just one?
So just the Boys and Girls Club, but what would the cap be, Craig?
40, wasn't it?
So we were going to start with 40 because we came up with 40 after meeting with the principals, looking at the number of kids out of school and in school. And then the idea is that, because what we don't want to do is bring a ton of kids on until we view this as a pilot. We test, we iterate, we refine, we prove our hypothesis that this will work, and then once we prove it, then we can expand larger if need be. I think when we talked to the principals, they were saying across all 3 middle schools and the high school, they estimate there's about 100 kids right now that are most frequently showing behavioral disturbances. We'll focus on the top 40 initially, and usually there's like a rotation that aren't all behaving at the same time. So 40 will be a number that will allow us to address those 100 children that are having, who need the most support.
So you, if I'm understanding you, you're saying that you'll try to bring them up, and hopefully at some point in time you'll make the decision to put them back into their classrooms where they'll try to.
They'll circulate through on an ongoing basis. So
Okay.
it's just like
As
the model that
needed.
we talked about from Girls Inc. and what we currently do. So some kids will be there for 1 day, some kids might be there for 10 days. It's the cap is 40 kids in a day.
Yeah.
So 20 at the middle school level, 20 at the high school level. Our program that'll only allows 7 kids at a time. In recent years, pre-COVID, served as many as over 100 kids throughout the school year. So the number that will actually participate in the program will be much greater than 40. But in a day, we may see, depending on the suspension numbers, we may see 10 kids and 18 kids, and then it'll shift and.
As I sit here and listen to you, I think that you should be on television as Nashua's heroes. I'm earnest, I'm sincere.
One thing I want to say too is like, so prior to the role I have now, I was a consultant helping organizations with people enablement. That was my job. Kids, adults, organizations, they don't change, they evolve. And right now, we're talking about when they're at the club, or when they're at school, or when they're, the idea of having like Casey's team embedded in the schools, having us work hand in hand with Kimberly and the guidance counselors, having kids at the club, is we can't think of it in terms of geographies or locations. How these kids are going to evolve in a positive direction is through continuity of care. And so the idea is we have a large subset of kids within the school that need help. They may be one day at the club because they've done something that they need to go to in-school or school suspension. They may be sitting with a guidance counselor. They may be getting follow-on care with Casey's team with their family. We need to look at it in terms of that continuity of care. It's a group of individuals working together regardless of location or geographic location with a common goal of helping this subset of kids move forward in the right direction. That's how we need to be talking about this, so in my opinion.
I think it sounds like an incredible program, and I think it could really make a big difference in the lives of some of the kids that go through. I think it's just exceptional.
I'm going to let Ms. Bishop have the floor. She's been very patient.
Yes. So I actually worked for a program like this back when the Phoenix Academy was downstairs in the Boys and Girls Club, back when Brentwood was in Merrimack, Clearway. So I've worked with this program, and I still know the kids that went through it, and they're fantastic adults now. But the amount of money that the district saved on out-of-district placements by being able to have the kids in this kind of a setting, there is a cost associated to it, but it's nowhere near sending somebody down to, the Lighthouse Academy or whatever other schools we're using right now for out-of-district placements. But I think it's fantastic to have the kids come in, do the schooling. Reaching them where they're at, I think, is most important when you're building up academic success. Realizing that they have different needs but different strengths. Some kids need that bigger space of movement in order to absorb the academics that are going on, and you guys are going to be able to provide that for them. I think having the counseling in the school that you're providing with the youth council is going to be key in that kind of transition back into the mainstream classroom, but then keeping them in the mainstream classroom. And I think a lot of times my favorite part of the job that I did was when we did the collective meetings with the team of teachers, and we would do the IEPs together, we would do the 504s together. All the teachers would come, the parents would come, and the community resources would come. And the IEPs that they built for those students were so much more comprehensive because they had, this is what's available at home, this is what's available in the community, this is what's available at school. We can put together a really solid plan, and these kids were eliminating the cracks that they normally fall through. So when we bring programs like this into the schools with these kids who kind of live within minefields, we're really shoring up a plan for them that ensures success where they want to be successful, but it also ensures that the district isn't putting extra on them that isn't appropriate for their level of academics, but also doesn't meet kind of what they want to do in life. Not every kid wants to grow up and become a, professor of literature. Like some kids, I would have liked to become a mechanic. That sounds like fun. So I think with programs like this, when we're putting it in, it's so much more cost-effective than what has been done before. Patty Place's program, the Phoenix Academy, was an amazing program. We may have a nurse still at Broad Street that I got to work with all the time who was in that program. But I still know a lot of the adults from when they were teenagers, and they are successful adults. They have families of their own, and they have a lot more coping skills, and they do that kind of peer mentoring, and have become really successful in their niche of things. And I cannot speak more highly of programs like this that are interdisciplinary and complementary with all of the resources that are available to kids. So I hope the committee pushes this through, and I've been fighting off like cheering for you this whole time because this is all the stuff that I love.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for coming and taking time out of your schedules to talk to us about this, and also for working with Dr. Sarfty and the administrative team here, and the YMCA and the other community partners. It's really moving to see a community come together to try and help our kids move forward, especially right now where, when we talk about the continuity of care, it's really difficult right now because a lot of times you can't
find family counseling or other types of counseling. So I really appreciate that. One of the questions that I had was regarding coming back into school after the suspension. A lot of discussion that comes up at the Ed Council, where the teachers kind of come and talk directly to board people, is regarding discipline and the difference between discipline and punishment. That's a discussion that happens a lot, and I love that this is teaching as opposed to punishing, because punishing doesn't work in my opinion. But what about bringing that child and reintegrating them back into the classroom settings? Because I've heard that a lot of teachers feel like they have a student who has had a behavioral incident, sometimes that are scary or dangerous, and then they just come back. And the teacher doesn't have any way of, knowing what happened, knowing that things are going to change. They're missing that reintegration piece to make them feel safe and to make them feel like they can safely teach a child who's had a behavioral incident that maybe got physical or was super disrespectful, or, some of the reasons why kids get suspended in the first place.
So every student who reenters school will have a reentry meeting, and there certainly will be parameters put in place. But Casey, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the needs assessment and how sort of that care will continue in the schools, depending on what the children need.
Sure, yeah. So once the student has a needs assessment, the information is shared with the guidance department, the administrators, the parents, and so as Dr. Sarfty said, there's going to be a reentry meeting where they would sort of address what happened, and then generally the way that our counseling program works is that we're able to call kids out of class during the day. We have a certain number of kids who are on the caseloads, and so our counselor within the first day that they're back would meet with them, go over the needs assessment. I think a really important piece of it that we do now and that we would continue is the student is very involved in the process of, understanding what's in the needs assessment, understanding the recommendations that are being made. And so really kind of sit down with them and make sure that the pieces that are in there, they understand and that the family's able to follow up on that. They will be able to access those services with the counselor until either we're able to match them with, in some cases, it will just really be a return meeting. And then, they're able to carry on. And if they need to see the counselor down the road, they can. But at other points, it'll be really working with them to get the referral that they need and meeting with them on an ongoing basis until they're able to do that. That meeting with the counselor does not involve the teachers, but we will be able to assure the teachers that the student is continuing to receive mental health and or substance use support services ongoing once they do return to school.
Thank you. And I think it's just, there are a lot of kids who have even IEPs for behavioral stuff. And so it's knowing that there's a plan, I think, that can be really reassuring as an educator who works with that child, on a daily basis, ongoing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, if no one else has any questions, I think we really appreciate you being here this evening to tell us about the plans moving forward. So thank you so much.
I wanted to say one thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Claffey.
I want to apologize for not being there, and I want everyone to know how lucky we are to have Mr. Fitzgerald back here in Nashua. Purple Cross recipient, Air Force veteran, paramilitary rescue, went to the Boys and Girls Club for 10 years growing up in Nashua. Mr. Fitzgerald, I'm so glad you came back. Grateful you came back. Hope to thank you in person, give you a big hug. It's been a long time since we parted ways on a Turkish twist. That's it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's good to be back.
All right. Thank you very much. And Dr. Sarfty, yes?
So, Ms. Brown, I think tonight we are looking for a motion. I know that's not in your packet. I apologize.
It's all right.
So we're looking for a motion to approve the partnership with the Boys and Girls Club and the Youth Council. And the total amount, I can come over there and show you the total amount. The the project will be funded through ESSER 3 funds.
Is that that's not the 32.6, is it?
I'll come over.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Did you say through a grant?
Yes, it's going to be from ESSER 3, correct? Or
Yeah, ESSER 3. So it's,
I'm sorry.
no, you're fine, I'm sorry. It's a big number, don't forget. So this is going to take us through the next 2 school years. This is all the transportation, the positions.
Okay. All right, so I am looking for a motion, and this, you said, I'm sorry, this is ESSER 3? Okay. To approve the partnership with the Teaching and Learning Alliance. Oh, I'm sorry. Project Succeed. I apologize, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Approve the.
That's not the 32.6, is it? I'll come over. Okay.
Hold on, Mr. Claffey, I think we need you to mute your phone for a minute. So we're going to approve the Project Succeed in the amount of $682,627.33 to be paid out of the ESSER 3 funding. Can I get a motion for that?
I can make the motion to move it forward to the board.
Yep. And
Can you tell those of us who aren't knowledgeable what that ESSER is? The
so the
funding?
ESSER funds are the fund, actually, I'm going to let Dr. Sarfty.
Yeah, certainly. So ESSER funds are really the COVID relief funds that school districts have received. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. And Dr. Sarfty just explained also that that will take us all the way through the next 3 years.
I asked that because back when we lost the Phoenix, it was money. We eliminated that whole program because of money. And I'm not saying it was perfect, but there were a lot of kids that were caught and saved, got help when they needed it. And you plant a seed and you never know where that seed's going to blossom, but I'm sure there were blossoms. So, and I know you will have, the Boys Club, I personally have witnessed some of those blossoms. So it's, my son was one of them. So thank you again. I can't thank you enough.
I just want to add also that number, while it's a large number, that number pays for the facilities, for transportation, for the academic tutors, for additional counselors. So this is the whole enchilada, if you will.
The Phoenix was well over $1 million, I will tell you that. And I don't think we had, I think it was around the 100 number that you're talking about. So I don't, you might remember that number, Mrs. Johnson, I don't, but I think it was under 100 students they had.
I can't think of anything better to spend this money on.
No.
I mean, it's meant for the kids.
Wonderful.
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Johnson?
Yeah, the Phoenix, I believe, was a full-time school, if I remember correctly. This isn't a full-time school. This is just to move children around, our students, when they have behavior problems, and then we mainstream them back in. So this is good till next year, June of 2023. So what plans do we have in place once these ESSER funds go in order to continue a program if this is successful, or even to maybe develop it into like the Phoenix program if we had to do something like that again?
So a couple of things. One thing I just want to say is the total cost here is definitely an estimated sort of high estimate because of the fact that we would be starting later than we initially had anticipated. So there's that. The other piece is that, you know, we would continue to seek out grant funds. We definitely have reached out to some of our even local partners who are very interested in a program like this because of the fact that we have different community organizations coming together. I think that's something that is unique, and that's something that's exciting to a lot of people, but we would continue to seek out additional grant funds to pay for an opportunity like this.
because Ms. Ziem and I have seen programs come and go, and programs that were helping our students that disappeared because of funding. And so although this is 2 years out, we don't think past 2 years, that if this is a program that's really going to help our students and maybe has to become more of a full-time program, because I know we have Clearway and I know we have the Brentwood, but that can only stretch us as far, and we have different students for different issues, that we need to, if we see that this program is working and we might need to make it a full-time, we need to think ahead, not fall behind, because it's our students that we have to help. So I hope that that's what we're going to be doing, thinking ahead.
I think that's a good point, and I think I agree with Ms. Lampier that I think that this is a valuable use of the ESSER funds, and I think that since I've been working with Dr. Sarfty, I've been very impressed with how proactive she is with pursuing opportunities to grow our services in the district. So I'm encouraged, especially when we've got lots of different people working together, to look forward into that. So, all right.
Thank you for catching that. That was a good catch. We definitely need to recognize your efforts.
Thank you. So, all right. Well, I will second this if it didn't have a second. And Mr. Claffey, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Lampier?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you guys very much for your being here tonight.
Madam Chair, if I could just add, I would be remiss if I didn't add the fact that Mr. Bob Chopa, the Director of Student Services, worked really, really hard with me and with these amazing folks on this. So I just wanted to make sure that we give a shout out to Bob.
You know what? We did not mention Bob's name nearly enough. He is behind the scenes he's a backbone in this district. So thank you very much for reminding us of that, Dr. Sarfty. He's a treasure. Thank you.
What's his last name? What was his last name?
Chopa.
Chopa. Oh, thank you.
All right. So thank you so much, Ms. Raymond. All right. We have just a couple more items. We're going to try to knock them out. The next one is the Teaching and Learning Alliance, and we do have something, a motion up for that. Do you want to give us a little short overview?
Absolutely. So I know that Ms. Johnson talked a little bit earlier about the lack of phonics, and unfortunately that was a consequence of whole language. Luckily, we know better now, so we do better. Teachers in the district received materials for foundations. They received some limited training right before COVID hit, and that really has to do with phonics instruction, phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and unfortunately, like I said, COVID hit, and so we have a lot of teachers who have been reaching out to me hungry for foundations, professional development. They also have balanced literacy in this district, and a lot of teachers haven't really received adequate training when it comes to small group instruction, what the workshop model should look like, and that is nobody's fault. It really is because we brought these great programs in, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and then there weren't really opportunities. And so now we do have these opportunities. I wanted to make sure that we found a partner who could work with us over at least the next couple of years, and a partner who really believed in our model, our literacy model, and our philosophy as a district. I also wanted to make sure that we found a partner who understood the science of reading and could sort of thread in that science and that research into the work that we do every single day. So what I have before you today is a partnership with the Teaching and Learning Alliance. I can tell you that I worked with them extensively in Lawrence, Mass. When I was there, and we had wonderful results. But I also know that there are districts all over New Hampshire who also work with them. I hadn't spoken to them in a couple years, and when I called them, I was pleasantly surprised because they were able to offer the type of professional development that our teachers are looking for. And so yeah, we're just really, really excited to be able to make sure that we have workshops for teachers after school during the summer. I would also love to host these drop-in sessions that really didn't have a specific topic. If we had a teacher who was, struggling, let's say, with a student or a couple of students, maybe they've tried a number of interventions that kind of we talked about earlier, and then didn't really know what the next steps would be. They'd be able to come to these drop-in sessions and just say, hey, listen, I have this child in 3rd grade. Here's what's going on. What do you suggest? And then be able to come back to the next drop-in session and talk about what progress was made or not. So just really exciting stuff.
Excellent. Does anyone have any questions from the committee? All right. I'm going to look for a motion to recommend to approve the partnership agreement with the Teaching and Learning Alliance in the amount of $32,600 to be paid from ESSER funds.
I'll make the motion.
All right, and I'll second it. Mr. Claffey? How do you vote? Mr. Claffey, are you still there? I think he might be muted himself.
Yeah, yes, sorry, I had trouble with my phone. I vote yes, sorry.
All right. Ms. Lampier?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I'm really glad that you're looking at all these different options to help our kids read. All right, next, and you're going to have to pronounce this for me.
Confianza.
Confianza, all right.
All right, so I'll be brief with this one. So teacher feedback is really important to us. Initially, when we talked about a partnership with an organization to help us respond to the DOJ's directives and recommendations, we initially partnered with West Ed Consulting, which is a very large consulting firm. And while they certainly bring to us a wealth of expertise, the feedback from our teachers was that the professional development that they were receiving was too high level, and not high level because, certainly not because teachers couldn't understand, but high level because the professional development didn't apply to what teachers were doing every single day. Teachers were expressing to us that, they wanted to learn about strategies and practices that they could apply the next day in their classroom to help their students. And so we listened to them, and what we decided to do, based on a number of discussions with the teacher, the ESL teacher team or the ELL teacher team, is we severed our partnership with West Ed. We didn't feel the need to continue on. And so we really looked for a more local partner that was able to address what the teachers were telling us they were looking for. And we also wanted to find a partner that has worked closely with the Department of Justice and understands, like I said, this region of the country. West Ed was out of California. Again, a very large a very large consulting firm. Confianza is a smaller sort of organization, a nonprofit from the Boston area. And essentially what these folks did was, when the Department of Justice had a settlement with the Department of Education, like the Massachusetts Department of Education, right now we just have a settlement with Nashua. But there was at one point a settlement with the entire Department of Education in Massachusetts. And as a result of not meeting the needs of English learners, there was required professional development that was tied to teacher certification, lots of things kind of going on there. And the folks from Confianza were the individuals who helped to, they were the architects of the professional development that was delivered, and that still is delivered and required to be delivered to teachers all across Massachusetts. Additionally, sort of what was the big buy-in and perk for our teachers is that our teachers, our English, our ELL teachers are very, very big fans of software that we can use for our English learners, called Elevations. The name escaped me for a second. And what they found was that, as a matter of fact, the president of Confianza, her sister, is one of the folks who created Elevations. So that was really exciting because not only did they have the name recognition, but also because they really wanted to be able to embed Elevations into the professional development for our teachers because it's a resource that we pay for. We already have it at our fingertips, and Elevations offers amazing strategies that we can use for our kids. And so being able to sort of navigate the program, really utilize it and bring it into everyday lessons is something that they were really, really excited for. But the other part of this is that Confianza really values the input of our teachers, the ones who are facilitating this learning. And so every step of the way, the teachers are part of the development of the professional learning, which is, certainly what they're looking for, and it's what we're looking for too, because our whole goal is to grow capacity within our district. So with that, I'm asking that you all approve this partnership with Confianza.
Okay. Does anyone from the committee have any questions? No? Oh, go ahead, Ms. Singh.
Was there a cost? Did I,
God damn it.
oh, Lydia, please. Frustrating, huh?
Okay. It's $22,500.
No, I didn't see a paper here on mine for that. Yeah, somewhere back there?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I think this sounds great, especially if it's something that our ELL teachers are already utilizing the software that they can learn even more about. And obviously, if it's a similar settlement that we had here, it makes a lot of sense. So I move to recommend to approve the partnership agreement with Confianza in the amount of $22,500 to be paid by ESSER funds.
I second that.
Thank you, Ms. Lanfear. All right, Mr. Claffey, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes, and Ms. Lanfear?
Yes.
And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so,
I think we're going to hold off on everything else.
all right, so, yes, we went a little bit long this evening. We had lots on the agenda to talk about. So I think if it's okay with the committee, we're going to get the updates from the next curriculum chronicle and everything next time around. So unless anyone has anything to add, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
All right, and I will second it. Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Lanfear?
Yes.
And I vote yes. We are adjourned at 7:52.